Welcome to Heart and Mind Talks, a podcast for female entrepreneurs navigating life and business. I'm Vanessa Ortali, award-winning speaker and coach. Join me and expert guests as we uncover how to make success simpler, more fun, and feel truly aligned to you. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who could use a little extra love and inspiration. Let's go. I want you to love being a woman. There is so much power in being a woman. And even though I know there is a lot of confusion of what femininity is, what being a woman is in today's culture, I truly believe that you get to be a confident, powerful woman. And in doing so, in tuning into your femininity, it will actually make you happier and more successful. So the perfect person to bring into this conversation is Jessica Mowforth. We will talk all about tapping into your femininity, improving your sex life, and how it will actually impact the amount of money you make and your business. Enjoy. I am so happy to bring you ladies into this conversation today. Today, I have another great friend of mine, and we are going to be speaking all about femininity, owning your feminine power, and sex. Because as female entrepreneurs, right, there's this struggle between the masculine and feminine energy. And this has nothing to do with sex. This is the energy that we possess within our bodies. And there's this balance where how do we come into our feminine and then also have amazing sex life? So I present to you my friend, Jessica Mowforth. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I cannot wait to dive into this, especially with you. We've had many, many conversations, so this is probably going to be so much fun, and who knows where it will end up because, well, you and I like to go in all kinds of directions.
I know. I think the hardest thing for me in this conversation is we both get so passionate. I have to make sure to remember that other people are listening and that I can't talk over you because I get really excited. Right?
But it goes both ways, or that we aren't here for 6 hours.
Yes, exactly. 100%. Because Jessica and I will be known to be in a coffee shop for like 4 to 6 hours, just talking or hanging. So I'm just so excited to dive in. So let's go back to kind of my intro, because we talk about this all the time. I want to first start out this conversation by saying, for me, especially, we live in a world as an entrepreneur, and even within this mindset and self-development space, that has been created by a lot of masculine energy and masculine people. And this is not bad. It's not bad that they have created this. I'm so grateful. I'm so proud. And this is also now a calling for us as women to show how we do it a little bit different, because what works for a man isn't necessarily going to work for women. We are made differently. We have different hormones and bodies and energy. We give birth, like it's different, right? And right, like I know in my own journey, I started out trying to do it the action, the hustle, the masculine way. And we can talk a little bit more about masculine and feminine, right? And it led me to pure exhaustion, depression, anxiety, overwhelm, like overworked, everything. And exactly, burnout, and also completely broke and not successful. Right. Only until I started to shift that into owning my femininity, what femininity meant to me, and coming into my own power. And maybe this is also a conversation of just like coming into what is right for you. Yeah. But to me, that was in my feminine. And only until I came into that was I able to really expand my business, expand my relationships. I was attracting different men. I was attracting different clients. Like it had a huge effect. So let's dive into that.
Okay.
And you feel free to share your story of how this became relevant to you, but also so that we can support other women in this transition if it feels called to them as well.
Totally. Cool. This is a big, like what you just said is massive, and we could dive in this direction in so many ways and talk about so many things, but I can very much relate. both in business and in life. I even recognized it in my dating life and in relationships, just this need for control, which ultimately is there for protection, this need to hustle, this need to prove, this need to succeed, money.
And I want to break it down. Let's break it down then into the relationship and the business. Okay, so let's talk about us actually being in our feminine and how that changes our relationships.
So I'm going to start with saying that I coach femininity very different now than I used to, because and the reason why I'm saying this is because you've mentioned it a few times, let me say that again, a few times, where for me, that's how I used to coach as well, is recognizing when we are in our feminine and when we are in our masculine. And I don't look at it that way anymore. I believe as women, we are all feminine in relationship with the masculine. We're not ping pong balls. All of a sudden we're here, then there, and back and forth. Like, I'm coaching, therefore I'm masculine. Now I'm not, therefore I'm feminine. I feel like it doesn't do us justice as women. And when
we have to go deeper there. What does this mean? Because the average person who isn't even familiar with the conversation of masculine, feminine, like, what are you talking about?
So quickly, what we usually looked at it is feminine, being more in flow, being in our body, out of our head, being in touch to our nervous system and our feelings and all of that. Where masculine is more doing. Feminine is being, masculine is doing. It's more of the structure, the hustle, all of that. Where when we're working and we're in business, when we're leading, when we're coaching, we're in masculine, and when we are relaxing or taking care of ourselves, we're in feminine. I don't see it that way anymore, and I don't coach it that way anymore. Okay. So what I do is I recognize us as feminine beings, our endocrine systems, the way we process emotions, the way our brains work, all of that is very different than the male makeup of his body, his endocrine system, the way he processes emotions, the way he looks at love, money, and relationships, so different than us. However, when we look at masculine entities, we'll call them, money is masculine. Anything that is a provision or structure. So money is masculine, structures, frameworks, men, God, whatever, that is masculine. So if I can recognize as a woman in my feminine that that is who I am, and then be in relationship with the masculine, I can look at my business as I'm in relationship with my business. My business is providing me something and I'm being within my business, versus me being masculine when I'm working and not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So here's what I'm hearing is you can look at different entities in your life as masculine, feminine energy. And since we're speaking to the female entrepreneur, oftentimes being in business, you're in your masculine. But now this new way, which I totally agree with, and I teach my clients too, it's how do we be in our feminine always and like morph that even when we're in masculine activities? Am I hearing that correctly?
Ish. I don't, because I don't even look at it as being in masculine activities. I always look at it as being in relationship with the masculine, being in relationship with money. Money is a relationship. Being in relationship with our men, being in relationship with our business, being in relationship to structures, so that we could then let go of feeling like we need to have the control to hold it all together, instead of creating structures, living within those, so that we have the safety to just let go and show up and exist, because we know that we're already taken care of. So I found it a little bit confusing for women when they were bouncing back and forth, where it's not like we are masculine, our feminine, our masculine, our feminine. We are always feminine, but sometimes what happens, and you can resonate with this and I can resonate with this, is we are faux masculine by wearing a mask that looks more masculine, but it's more because we've got some wounded feminine happening that we feel like we need to almost put on an act. And a lot of times this is more subconscious than it is conscious. We're not intentionally waking up and saying, oh, I have to hide my feminine. It's just that we feel vulnerable or insecure, or we've been conditioned to believe that in order to be valuable, in order to be successful, in order to be safe, we have to be these ways. We have to be the strong, hustling boss babe.
Okay. Love it. Let me summarize then quickly of what I'm hearing. So, because this is also, I mean, it's huge, right? It's so how you used to look at it is like the masculine, feminine, right? And now it's really just us, how we started this call, like coming into our own self and then having that relationship, like you said, with things throughout our lives. It almost sounded to me like even this a similar kind of relationship as we have with our thoughts. Right. And then we're not having to ping pong, take off different hats, put on different masks between masculine and feminine. Because then you said something super huge. And this is where I want to talk too about how we can then be in that essence, be in our own feminine, in work, in relationships. Because when you mentioned the faces, right, and the trauma, oftentimes we pretend to be more masculine, more strong because we don't feel like we're enough, because we don't feel good enough, and we think we have to pretend. And but the reason why it's so important in this context is that we want you to just feel good and feel like you at all times.
Right. Totally.
No matter what, right?
And we go against that in so many ways. What you just said about not being enough, but also women, I see it all the time of being too much, right? And we usually live in this paradox of both, of like, I'm not enough and I'm too much. And I think that is one, the essence of being a woman is wild and wavy and changing and seasonal and cyclical and all of these beautiful things that when we actually recognize that that is what creates a woman's beauty, and I don't mean beauty as in just physical, I just mean the magic of being a woman, then we get to celebrate the fact that we're not enough here and we're too much here because we're meant to be that in that moment, that it's not enough. It's just that you're here in this season of your cyclical way of being, and that's more than enough, right?
Okay, I want to dive there because I want to have a little celebration moment. What do you love about being a woman?
Oh my
Like,
gosh,
what are our superpowers, right?
I love my menstrual cycle. I love women's menstrual cycle, and that I believe needs to be celebrated because it is such a blueprint, a unique, specific blueprint to us as individual women, not just women as a whole, but us specifically, our health, our well-being, our vitality. It communicates to us in every way throughout there's seasons of our each individual monthly cycle. So when we can actually live into that, we can utilize it for productivity, for dating, for travel, for everything, for your business and how you want to show up, for collaborations like what we're doing now, when you want to do your taxes or proofread your book or create content or run a course. You can actually put that into your specific menstrual cycle and know how to take care of yourself in that process so that you're not nosediving into burnout. You're not pushing yourself through your period, but you're thriving through your ovulation and then resting through your menstrual bleed so that you actually are taking care of your body, which I believe is a foundation when it comes to femininity. I don't believe that we can truly say I've embodied my femininity until we've embodied the magic and power of our menstrual cycle.
I think that also is a self-love element in the sense that full love of our body and everything that it does for us. Like if we want to really, and maybe being a woman means something different to every person, right? In their own femininity. But for me, I've always really loved being a woman. I've loved the flirtiness, the girliness, like even our outfits, like the sexiness, even the coyness that we can be. Like women are just so freaking cute. I love them.
And I wish every
Yeah.
woman knew that,
Yeah. Like
right?
it's so powerful. It doesn't have to be strong and tough. It can be flowy and just flirty and sweet and loving. And that is also very strong.
John, I was just going to say the same thing. I was going to say, like, what we have been taught is strength, but not necessarily as a woman. I think that when we embody that, and we are still, sometimes you're soft and sweet, and sometimes you're a wild savage, right? And I think there's strength in both sides. I don't believe that we have to put on what I like to call body armor in order to feel safe or need to defend ourselves. Sometimes there's more strength in a smile, knowing that my body doesn't have a desire to, like, rebel back, right? And then there's moments where you totally feel like, nope, there's energy in my tank, and I choose to fight this battle, whatever that may be, right? I think in that, it's having the awareness of what's fueling your fire. Is it your intuition and your divine feminine guidance, or is it trauma? Is it unhealed wounds, your inner conflict that is now just purging out of you because it no longer has anywhere to move within you? And when you embody your femininity, you recognize the difference between trauma misleading you and intuition guiding you.
Yeah, I see that a lot in my clients, them mistaking fear and intuition.
Yeah.
And right. And it can feel the same. It can feel like this body saying, nope, that's not safe. We're not going there.
Yeah.
But it can be trauma or it can be intuition.
Right. And it is their body telling them it's unsafe. No, don't go there. Their nervous system, they've experienced something in life, which could go all the way back to, like, their parents, that, like, epigenetics talks about generational trauma. And trauma, there's different phases. There's big T and little t. So I talk more and I work more with clients that have gone through some big T when it comes to, like, sexual trauma, but little t being like relational, emotional trauma. And epigenetics is literally where it's genetically passed down. It could have been gestational, and then it could have been just beliefs that have been conditioned since you were a child that you take on and then you project out. So because of that, your nervous system is such an important part of us that is there to take care of us. So I think, based on what you just said, I would love to just have the audience know that don't blame your nervous system for that. Don't be shamed or feel guilty that you feel that way. That's actually your body trying to protect you and keep you safe. And the only way to shift that, which is called bioplasticity, we've got neuroplasticity to rewire your brain, but bioplasticity is in your body, in your nervous system, connected to your brain. And what you do is you then come into rewire and refamiliarize your nervous system with safety. And the only way to do that is to, one, process, but to acknowledge the cues of what your nervous system is telling you in the first place. If that throws you out of your window of tolerance and you're now in a state of hypo arousal, you can't push yourself through that, which you probably see all the time with your clients in business, is just trying to push through instead of actually recognizing what's going on within so they can heal, so then they could show up as opposed to forcing.
Yeah. I always say, so I feel like there's two elements here, because when we confuse our fear for intuition, 100%, I agree. It's coming back to making our body feel safe through the process and realizing that an alarm doesn't have to be going off here. You're totally safe. You are good. We are fine. And soothing that, healing that so that we can move through. But I always tell my clients when they can't feel the difference, and maybe it feels different in you, but for me, I can always know the difference between intuition or fear, because for me, intuition is short term and neutral. So for me, intuition just tells me my next step. It doesn't tell me the long, future of that's something 100 down the road. Like you're on a first date and, oh, you're going to marry this person. Okay, maybe you have a little, but usually the intuition says, I'm having a good time. I want to see them again, right? It's the fear that starts questioning too far ahead, and it's not neutral. The neutrality of intuition is just this like curiosity, this little nudge of go here. And the fear, which so many people think of intuition, is this job isn't for me. This person isn't for me. Like we go to the X so quickly. I'm like, why are you going there? Right. Yeah. And it's just self-preservation. You're just trying to protect yourself.
Totally. And I think that we also live, this may be a little controversial, but we live in a culture that craves comfort, and we need discomfort to grow at a pace where our nervous system has the capacity to hold. So it's called pendulation, where you recognize that you need discomfort, but you step out into the discomfort and then you come back to safety, and then you step out into the discomfort and then you come back to safety, so that you're now you're not throwing yourself out of your window of tolerance, but you're pendulating so that you can grow and expand and evolve. Does that make sense?
Totally. That's a really beautiful visual of this, like almost this putting your toe in the water, see, you're safe, and then coming back and getting that safety and then moving forward. So I really, really see that pendulum of moving out of your comfort zone and then coming back and seeing that you're safe, so that the next time you can stay out a little longer.
Yeah. And then eventually it will shift where you'll be many, many steps ahead. But I think that we live in a culture that just craves comfort. So if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Or if it doesn't feel good, fight back, defend yourself. And that's where we're getting caught up into some dynamics in this world that are just like,
they're heavy. Let's put it that way. They're heavy. Yeah. So that reminds me of something that I always say, because I truly believe, and I work with mostly women, especially when they're building their business, that it can be easy, but ease doesn't always mean easy, right? There's this, it can be easy doesn't mean that it always feels comfortable.
No. Amen. Totally.
Right? We can still lean into this ease and flow and next best step and soothing ourselves through that discomfort. I think from what I'm getting from this conversation so far, it's this knowingness that isn't always comfortable, but as we continue to step into our femininity, our greatest superpower is moving through the emotion and creating safety in our body through that emotion.
Totally. And the awareness that that's happening, because you can't process what you don't know is now every time we're moving, we are going to be processing things, but the more we slow down, the more we will have the awareness of what is actually occurring in our bodies. Because what I see in my clients a lot is that they're moving so fast that they don't even recognize the level of anxiety or the fear that's driving their decisions or their instantaneous reactions or defenses. They don't recognize the armor that's there until they slow down and they're like, holy shit, this like pounding in my chest, or the fact that my body aches, or that I'm reactive to my husband, or that I'm isolating and not going out and dating, and yet I crave to meet a high value man. Right?
Yeah. For me, and even in this conversation, femininity and owning our femininity, it also means coming into our body. I want to get really clear on what it means for us to come into our femininity so that we can attract the right partner, so that we can create businesses with ease. What does this mean for you? I want to go deeper into what it means for us to own our feminine, release the trauma, move through those emotions, and how we know that we're not in our feminine. For me, it was depression, anxiety, overwhelm, overworked, burnout, right?
100%.
What do
Yeah.
you see within yourself or other people?
For me, I very much relate with the same symptoms as you, and just feeling like I remember, and this happened a few times, that I would look at my life and what I was seeing wasn't what I was feeling. And I just really was conflicted between what I truly desired and how hard life started feeling. Or I would gain things, I would get a relationship, I'd make a good amount of money or something, and I wouldn't feel what I thought I should feel. Um, and I see this a lot with clients. I see it with with my single girls that are wanting to attract a certain quality of man that just keep bumping up against emotionally unavailable, non-committal, in my terminology, Peter Pan type men, like just more guys than they are men. They lack the connection to masculinity, or in their relationships, they have a strong connection with their partner, but it's more of like roommates or co-parents or business partners than it is like an intimate, emotionally bonded, sensually fueled, and passionate partnership. So there's a lot of women, ourselves, because you said it as well, included, that can probably very much resonate with the burnout and the trying to do it all, and trying to do it all looking a certain way is not femininity. And I think as a woman, we have to recognize what that is for us. And I guess to tie this into business specifically is like, how much can you do before it starts taking away from you? And what are you doing that is taking away? So how many hours can you work on your business before it affects your relationship with yourself and your relationship with your family, with your husband, with dating? How
Okay.
long can you be on your computer before that affects you and your hormones?
So,
Right.
what makes this conversation different? I want to still focus on this word femininity. What makes this conversation different than just the average healing conversation? Because what we're saying, someone could also just say, oh, well, if I just heal my traumas, then I can have the same outcomes. I want to really get clear on what part of the puzzle this femininity plays, and not just healing from our traumas and our triggers and our
Well,
thoughts.
as a woman, embodying your femininity will naturally heal trauma and inner conflict, which will then actually show your truth. So you may not even desire the same things you desire now once you've actually embodied your femininity, because everything else will kind of shift, and you'll start to see what it is that does light your life up. What brings you pleasure? What brings you excitement? Do you actually want to be a business owner, or do you want to be a mom? And that actually brings you so much joy. But we live in a world that says you're just a mom, right?
Cool. Yeah,
So
I think you hit the nail on the head, because it's coming into your authentic self, but then us not separating the fact that we are women and being feminine is part of the authentic self.
yes. And in such a powerful way. And that's where I could scream from rooftops, because so many people think femininity is weak and passive. And it just means that you need to go back to the 1950s, where you're only a mom and only a wife, and he only makes the decisions, and all of these things, where I believe there are some dynamics from back then that are truly serving when we open ourselves to fully understand them. Because when you, as a feminine woman, are with a masculine man, which you can only be with when you are feminine because of polarity, a masculine man does not want a feminine woman. It just doesn't, there is no polarity. It's like magnets that can't come together. So to attract in, or this is what I say to my clients, is if, as a single client, to attract in a masculine man, you need to embody your feminine, and to bring out your man's masculinity. If you are currently in relationship, you need to be in your feminine, because that and that's why I can work with so many women without working with their men, that all of a sudden changed the dynamic of the entire marriage through the woman, because
Mm.
of how much she has, how much power she has within just her femininity that can actually influence and inspire the masculine way more than the other way around.
Okay. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, why do I have to do all the work? This isn't for you to shift the relationship. This is for you, so that you feel good. Like, and when you were talking, it reminded me of women who talk about being on birth control
Yeah.
and attracting different men than when they go off birth control.
It completely changes their pheromones.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've never been on birth control. This is an entire other conversation of why not.
Yeah.
However, I still did see when I was in my masculine, I attracted different men, and I like a masculine man. That was my preference. And I really had to come into more of this ease and flow and my own feminine. So, how can women get more tuned into their feminine? What do you see working? And I'll share what worked for me as well.
Okay. To tune into their feminine, the first and foremost is to slow the heck down. And to find quiet and stillness to actually hear the voice of your body, so that you can actually start to recognize where you are currently. Then healing your nervous system, not diving into like a healing conversation, but to for your feminine for your femininity to show up, she has to feel safe. If she doesn't feel safe, she cannot show up. So regulating your nervous system is what's going to bring safety back into your body so that she can actually open and surrender and soften and be vulnerable, right? That's the whole premise of femininity, is the vulnerability, the surrender, the softness, the openness, of a woman. And I don't know about you, but when I don't feel safe, I can't do any of that. I can't crack my heart open when I feel scared. So if I can self-regulate and heal my nervous system, then I'm going to feel empowered in opening. Because the reality is it's not like all of a sudden you heal your nervous system and then it's going to feel super easy and simple to go and be vulnerable. No, these are still hard conversations sometimes. They are conversations where you're going to put yourself out there without knowing the response of the other person. But in that, you have what is called self-holding, feminine self-holding, where it has no matter of how the other person shows up, because you are so held within yourself that you don't collapse under pressure, that you
Yeah.
continue to descend into your womb, but you don't falter, you don't collapse, you don't just fall apart. You're being held. And that's what is so beautiful, when you create that. But it comes from nervous. I recognize this in myself. My biggest transformation from being able to take off what I call the mask of masculinity is nervous system healing. If not, if you're, because I know, and you're like this too, is we're both mentally tough. So what I recognized is how much healing I did in my mind that was so easy to override my body, and I would just mentally tough it out and push through, but I would think something and feel something different. And
Yeah.
then ultimately the feeling in my body is what would create my life. And when I recognize that it's not just a mind game, that it's actually in my body, and that I can heal my body and connect it to my mind, and that's where true transformation occurs. And that's where your feminine lives. She's hiding underneath it all.
Yeah. You can heal in the mind, like you said, before you can heal in the body. And I remember, I forget what book I was reading, and he had asked, like, when did you actually felt the grief, like in your body? Where is it? Does it sit in your body?
Yeah.
And I remember laying in bed and going back to the moment that my mom passed.
Mm.
And just sitting in that pain and just really observing, where is this sitting in my body? Where is it? What is my body telling me? And as soon as I did that, it was able to release.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's this beauty in this safety conversation that I want to reassure people listening. You don't need a partner to feel safe. What Jess has been talking about, and within this emotional regulation and nervous system regulation, it is about feeling safe in your body. And that is the most beautiful self-trust, beautiful self-love, beautiful confidence that you can carry. And I think that's where that strength comes from. Because when someone doesn't need someone else to make them feel safe, and they can sit in complete surrender, complete knowingness that everything is going to be fine, I am good, because I have complete trust in myself and my own intuition and my own ability to show up as my highest self, or whoever I want to be in this moment. Like, that's strength. That's
Totally.
where I want to sit every day.
100%. And without the lie that you're going to be able to take care of yourself held together. Sometimes I think the trust in the self-holding is that this may freaking hurt. I may actually break apart. The difference is I'm allowing myself to break apart because I know that I will be able to hold the pieces, and that something will be birthed for those pieces to come back together in a way that is serving to me. Because a lot of women will falter as soon as they're like, but now my heart's broken because the relationship ended. It's not about having this strength in the way of like, no, I'm fine. Like, it is good. This is serving. So I'm just going to release this. No, girlfriend, sometimes there's pain and there's suffering and there's hurt. You just don't lose yourself. You open yourself more.
Yeah. Oh, and I feel this. This is really just learning how to move through the emotion. This entire last month, I had felt so much pain. But because I've done years and years of practice being in my feminine and moving through my emotions, I was able to just sit there in full-blown tears and just say, it's okay. I see you. I hear you. What do you need from me in this moment? What are you here to show me? And in the beginning, I didn't know it. Nothing was coming forward, but I just continued to sit in that stillness. And eventually things came forward of, this is still within you, let's move through this. You're still holding on to this. Let's let go of that. And you're right. It can be so painful, but then so, so, so beautiful.
Beautiful. And it helps you to cultivate resilience, right? It shows you that you are capable of doing hard things. You are capable of going through hard things.
Yeah. Yeah, you totally are. You as a woman are so much stronger than you know. And you coming into your feminine power will help you to attract your dream partner, will help you to build a business way more successful, because you're going to be in your knowingness of what you stand for. You're going to attract the right people. You're going to attract the right clients, the right team. Like, this is how being in your feminine, being in your zone of genius, like whatever that is, just expands every area of your business and your life.
Totally. And it's being in relationship with the masculine, aka your business, so that you're now creating a business that is taking care of you, not you having to take care of your business. So your business is structured in a way that serves your life, that serves your feminine. It's not an abusive husband that is just constantly trying to take from you.
Yeah. And tell you to do things. You should be doing this. You should be doing, because if
Yeah,
you had a partner like that, yeah, you would not.
Imagine your husband saying that you need to work 15-hour days in order to be valuable or worth. Like, no. So why are you letting your business tell you that?
Okay.
Why are you you're on a laptop while you're trying to eat food, which is one of life's pleasures that could totally bring out more pleasure in your body. And I know we're headed to sex, so
Yeah,
maybe.
well, we'll get there in 2 seconds. Oh, I want to quickly talk about this business. So, how have you personally created though that structure so that you can be in your feminine and in your business? What has worked for you? And I'll share what's
Honestly,
worked for me too. Yeah.
what I really had to accept was what my business is. My business is not linear, right? So when I can recognize that I'm not, I know you know, but I also am a registered holistic nutritionist. That's where I started with women in libido, is studying women's health and hormones. So that is more linear. When I can go online and say, I'm a holistic nutritionist and I help women heal their hormones through this protocol so they can go from A to B to C to Z, that's linear. So it was easy for me to sell that, where recognizing in my business now, like, what is femininity? What is desire? What is passion? What is pleasure? What is a successful relationship? Are there structures within it? Yes. Do they work for everybody? No. I have to be so out of my own way when I'm working with clients because it's so unique to their own blueprint, their own expression, their own menstrual cycle, their own relationship, everything they've gone through with their life, where their nervous system's at. So I can't just go and say, here's 3 ways to do this, and it's going to help everybody. It may help you where you're at. It may not. We may have to go somewhere further to the beginning. We may need to jump ahead 10 steps because you've done a lot of work. So for me, it was stop comparing myself to everybody else and to recognize that my business is not linear, the same way I'm not linear, and to go with what I'm feeling inside. What do I feel inspired by? What am I energized by? And how can I show up that is going to make a difference to somebody else? Not because I think it should, because I've felt it in my body and it has for me, and it's more coming from a place of sharing than it is telling or forcing, and listening to my body in the process and making sure that I'm not on my phone working or on my laptop while I'm eating, or that I'm not on any sort of tech right before I'm going to bed, or that I'm not like messaging a client before I go to bed or stimulating. Or if I have a great idea, I have to stop at a certain time because I'm easily, as a woman, inspired and excitable. So the more I actually embody my femininity, the more I'm excitable because I'm so in tune to pleasure and play that I'm like a little girl that I'm like, yes, I am so freaking excited. I don't want to say the downfall, but the other side of that is if that's happening for me at 9 p.m. at night, I will not fall asleep now until 2 a.m. So I need to take responsibility of that and say, okay, I have this really exciting idea, or someone just shared a podcast that inspired me. I need to pause this and listen to it or do with the thing, whatever it is, at a time that's going to serve me. Because what's not going to serve me is me listening to a great podcast or reading a great book or having an inspired idea and then all of a sudden start getting online to make a post about it and then stay up till the middle of the night and then wake up the next day stripped of energy. Now I don't have inspiration. I'm grumpy. My eating habits are off. I now have to force myself through clients. That doesn't serve me. When I can figure out what my body needs, follow through on that, do what I need, like write the idea down, put a bookmark on the podcast, whatever it may be, and then come back and say, now I have the capacity, I have this space to actually bring this into my life. Because that's where we get caught up. Like we live in a world that there's things at our fingertips, right? Whether it's our phone, a laptop, a book, like whatever it may be, a conversation with a fellow coach. We are so hyper stimulated that we don't know where we begin and where we end. And what's the separation from Jess to Vanessa, from Jess to Jess's business to whatever. And I think that's where we need to be more aware of our body and what she's needing so that we could recognize all of that and then create those structures specifically for us, which is being in relationship with the masculine, being in relationship with those structures. I like to call it your inner husband. Your inner husband creates the structure so that your feminine could thrive. My inner husband says, Jess, you can't be on your phone at 9 p.m., right? Structure, because my feminine needs the rest so that she can wake up tomorrow and still feel alive.
Yeah. And I think you've used this example with me before too, when we've spoken, is the structure is like the bed of the river so that you as the feminine can just flow.
Oh.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, I think this is also where people might get confused, because when we say set up the structure so you can be in your feminine, it's not planning out your entire day and trying to be the most productive thing possible.
Right.
It's funny because when I asked you the question of what structure and what do you implement to help you stay in the feminine in your business, I quickly wrote down 4 words and you touched on every single one. And so I want to share what those words are to kind of summarize what Jess was talking about. But for me, number 1 is stillness. I need to have so much stillness and alone time so I can listen to, like what you said, listen to what my body needs, listen to what I need, and hear the inspiration and or gain clarity on my next best step. The second thing, which is kind of connected, is space. I need so much space for me and a lot of space in my calendar. So I'm not going to say like, I have to get this done today. I give myself a lot of time. Do it this week, whenever you feel good. Right. And if that scares you because you procrastinate, quote unquote procrastinate, a lot of times procrastination is also coming from other patterns, right? Okay. The nervous system, right? Like, so that's another issue. But if you're in that feminine flow, it gives you that space to follow your inspiration and do it when you are in that energy to do so. Which then brings me to the third thing I wrote down was joy and energy. When we are in our joy as women and we keep following the energy, the most beautiful things are created. And then the fourth thing I wrote down was timing. And this is also kind of connected to what you said, in the sense that when I get an inspiration, it doesn't mean we have to force it in that moment. Being in our divine flow and our divine feminine, it's knowing that I might not take action on this in a year, but it's going to be there. And I have the trust and knowingness and confidence to allow it to percolate. And I'll know when I know. I'll know when the energy is right. I'll know when I'm ready. But then watching all of this is now, I want to highlight what you said of distractions, because I cannot be in any of those 4 things if I have distractions, right? Right. Social media, comparing yourself to others, all that other stuff, it will pull you right out. So it's knowing what those distractions are for you and then creating the space in your day so that you can show up and be who you want to be in those moments.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, now let's move into the sexola. So, okay, we are feminine, beautiful beings, and us coming into our femininity will also help us to increase our sex life, right? What do you see? How can we continue to allow that to improve our sex life? Because when we see sexuality in our world, sexual empowerment, so much of it, in my opinion, and what I've seen, will also come from trauma. Yeah. So what does it mean for us to truly come into our femininity and our own sexuality? What does that look like? And how can we be empowered in our own sex lives with our partners while dating, whatever that means for you, so that it's coming from this really whole, like, beautiful feminine place?
Big question with many answers.
Always asking the big questions.
Yeah. With like 8 questions within one.
Yeah, always.
All
Take
good.
it wherever you want to go.
Okay, cool. So first and foremost, I think that we need to recognize that we are not cookie cutters and that we don't fit into a mold, that sexy is what sexy is to you. And whether that is lingerie or a t-shirt, whether that's sex once a week or 5 times a week, if it works for you and you feel inspired and it works for your partner and he feels inspired and you're communicating and you're in alignment, that is great. So I just want to preface with that so that this is not a let's work your way up to having sex 3 to 5 times a week. Because, girl, if you're having sex twice a month and you and your man are so in love with that, then that is beautiful. That is so good, because so many times we find intimacy and pleasure in other things that maybe is not penetrative sex, that actually is your form of sexy or your partner's, and cuddling or whatever it may be for you is enough to bring that physical connection together. Now, if you have it in you where you're like, okay, my libido has changed, or I want to be having more sex, but I just don't feel it, or I feel put off by my partner, like turned off, or I just don't feel like I don't feel the respect or the attraction or the desire, but I want to. That's your body communicating to you, and that's where you want to listen and create some shifts. But I thought it was important to preface with the other, because I don't want someone listening thinking that they need to strive for something that they truly don't desire. But if you desire it, a desire is your body's way of communicating more than thoughts. So there's a difference between a desire and a thought. A thought is what you think you should or shouldn't. A desire is your body's truth. Okay? So we need to recognize the difference between what is a desire and what is a thought of what we think we should or should not. And also being curious about it, being curious about ourselves and understanding our values in life and in the bedroom. Like, what does sex provide you? What turns you on? What turns you off? And in that, getting curious by asking the question, why? How come? How so? So that you can start to learn, okay, well, I love sex, but I hate foreplay. But then sex is painful for me. So now I don't want to have sex with my partner because it's painful. Well, there's a good chance that your body's not actually aroused, which is why sex is painful. And a lot of arousal comes from foreplay. Foreplay can look all different. Foreplay can start with a scent of something, a song, the sound of your husband's voice, or it can be oral or whatever it may be. So it's understanding what is foreplay for you, what is your blueprint of arousal. Like, what is it that turns you on? What is it turns you off? And why? Do you actually desire foreplay, but you've gone through something traumatic that has stopped you from being able to enjoy that? And can you heal from what has happened to you so that you can enjoy that? Have you disconnected yourself from experiencing day-to-day pleasure that you can't even feel the pleasure in the food that you're eating? How are you going to try to feel the pleasure in any sort of sexual experience with your man, right?
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand. If you're burning yourself out and you're hustling and you are wearing a mask of masculinity and you're in wounded feminine because of that, well, that's also going to change the way that you experience pleasure or arousal or like a desire for sex. And it's also going to change the way you view your man. If you're in wounded feminine, you're hiding behind a masculine mask, and your husband's showing up more from feminine stuff, and you naturally desire masculinity, you may not have the desire for him, right? So it's recognizing that. But the only way to recognize that is to accept where you're at and to get curious and to release the shame that may have been attached through you, through culture, through your parents, saying that it is this way, it isn't this way, and it needs to be different, right? It's saying, okay, well, the reality is that I have been hustling. I have been putting my business above my marriage. And my husband is doing things that I just feel grossed out by. That's real. And then saying, okay, well, how am I showing up? How have I been taking care of myself? Self-responsibility is huge. And then when we take self-responsibility of our self-care and the way we show up, we'll recognize that, especially the men around us, shift. And then all of a sudden they shift, and now you're like, damn, that is great. You know what I mean? And then you'll notice a shift in your own body. But if you're not eating enough, if you're not sleeping enough, if you're not moving enough, hydrating enough, getting sunshine, doing things that you love, experiencing pleasure in your body, if you're not doing all of that in a day, your body is in a state of survival. And the last thing your body's going to want when it has a grizzly bear coming at her throat is to think about how to look cute in lingerie and have sex with her man. Doesn't happen that way, right? The only time it does is if you've been so programmed to utilize sex as a manipulation tactic to receive love. So that what that is you're still in survival, but you're overriding and you're having sex and you're doing it in a performative way, not because it even feels good for you, but you know that that is what's going to gain something from that man.
Yeah, I was going to mention that sex can feel empowering, but a lot of times it can be rooted in the desire to feel loved, the desire to feel wanted, right? So it almost turns you on because of trauma and because you trying to fill something else because you don't feel good enough, you don't feel hot enough, or whatever that is. So it's also shifting to have sex in a different way. Like,
Yeah.
what does divine sex look like when we're in our empowered feminine? And it maybe is a type of sex that you've never had.
Totally. And oftentimes it is. But if we come back to healing our nervous system, then we'll actually recognize what our body truly is yearning for. And then we get to respond to that versus something that's dysregulated, constantly living in a hyper or hypo state of arousal, pun arousal, right? Then we're living on a so consciously and subconsciously we're living two different lives, right? Our
Yeah.
conscious is telling us that we have to do this, and the subconscious is saying that really I just feel super scared or alone.
So, how do we learn to have sex from a feminine place and bring our discussion about femininity into the bedroom and into our relationships?
Is recognizing like what your body yearns for versus what your head thinks she wants and needs. And that's starting, like an exercise you could do is explore your pleasure with 3 times a day. And that doesn't mean like self pleasure. It could, but anything that brings you
People
pleasure.
are thinking, I work, Jess. I can't do that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. But like for me, what brings me pleasure that I pay attention to every day is like taking my dog for a walk with no sunglasses, letting the sun touch my eyes and my face. And when I'm in Alberta, so it's chilly, but right now when the sun's out, it actually feels so nice. So it's like cool air, hot sun on my face, and I go in areas that are not super crowded with cars and stuff. That feels good in my body. I don't bring my cell phone on purpose. I make sure that I am wearing in like layers or something enough that I am not like, oh my gosh, let's hurry through this walk because I'm cold. It's like, I know that if my hands are freezing, it won't feel good. So I make sure that I am dressed appropriately so that I can go on my walk and feel the sun on my face and see my dog and consciously take deep breaths. So I like to go in areas where there's not a lot of people because I really use that time to pray and to breathe. So I will breathe in deep and sigh out my mouth. So I don't want like a whole pile of strangers when I'm literally sighing, like making a noise, because it feels good to my body and it brings my body back into regulation. So I know that that is something that brings me pleasure, that I will prepare myself for that experience. I make it an experience, not something I have to do. Coffee is delicious for me, but I know that having it on an empty stomach sends my blood sugars and hormones on like a wild roller coaster ride that I hate. So I know that I have to have it after I eat, and I put like unpasteurized cream and maple syrup in it. Then it's cool with my blood sugars. I don't go in some anxious, weird spiral. And I don't drink it while I'm doing something. I don't drink it and talk or move or drive, nothing. I sit there and usually I'll find a sunbeam in my window just because I love it. And I will close my eyes and I will smell it and I will sip it slow and I will like feel what it feels like in my mouth. And it's warm. I feel my hands on the cup. I even smell the coffee grounds before I put it in my French press because it's an experience and it feels good to the point where my mouth will water with anticipation. So I
Wow.
do that at least one meal a day. I try with all, but sometimes life gets in the way, but at least one meal a day. I actually will say, what are 5 things I see, 4 things I touch, 3 things I hear, 2 things I taste, and 1 thing I smell. Whatever, I'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 while I'm eating with all of my 5 senses so that I can bring pleasure into the food, which is better for digestion and it slows me down and it satiates my body so much more. So if you can pick 3 things out of your day that bring your body pleasure, that's the first step to embodying your femininity in pleasure, which will show up in the bedroom as well.
Yeah, I think
Answer
that's
the question?
perfect. Yeah, I think it's perfect. It's simple. It's bringing it back to just what is pleasure for you. And you can't experience pleasure if you're not experiencing pleasure in your everyday life, whether it's food or sun or whatever that is for you, nature. So I think it's perfect. Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this forever.
Mm.
What would you love to leave? What do you think is the key takeaway from this conversation that you want to leave people with and you want them to walk away with thinking?
Again, with the big questions. Um, is that as a woman, you are born feminine and that it's in you. She's in you. She's alive. She's well and she's thriving. She just wants to be seen, but she wants and needs to be seen by you first. But she exists and she has so much power and that she's not weak. She's not passive. She's not a doormat. She's so strong and courageous and she can have anything her heart yearns and desires for when you create the container of safety for her to expand and let go.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to add to that and just say that you get to do it your way. And the only way you're going to know your way is if you listen to how you feel. There's no denying how you feel. If you're feeling off, listen. If you're feeling good, listen. Just keep following the joy. Keep following what feels good so that you can come into you and just shine so bright, own your femininity, and do it your way. Like that's what we're here to do because it can be easy. It can be flowy. It can be beautiful. You can create heaven on earth,
Yeah.
but you get to take those next steps to bring you there.
And it's messy and it's wild and it's painful. And all of those parts are lovable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just the pleasurable, happy bits. All
Yeah.
parts are you and all parts create the whole. And those parts are just as lovable as the parts that look lovable to the
Yeah.
outer.
I want to ask you one last question because that reminded me of a video I just saw of a girl talking about how she hates self-development. And there's some parts I hate about it too, but that's for another conversation.
Yep.
But the point of her video was I hate self-development. Ignorance was bliss. I wish I didn't know
Yeah.
everything that I know now. I wish I didn't dive in. I wish I didn't uncover all of these things. I was better off before. What would you say to her?
What would I say to her? I see you. I see you. I hear you. And I don't believe you. I feel like she's at a new threshold and that she's at a breaking point, and right now it feels like breakdown and just to keep going, right? I think I've even said this to you before where I'm like, why does it feel like I know too much? And how can I rewind and not know? There's pain knowing and there's pain not knowing. So the reality is life is contrast, and there's going to be good and suffering. There's going to be pain and suffering, and then there's going to be joy and pleasure. And to the depth that you're able to explore and hold yourself in both is what will keep you going to experience the other side of that. So I would test her in the sense of, are you sure?
Yeah.
But I would still say that there's pain and suffering regardless of what you know and what you don't know. It's just the difference in it. And at least in when you experience the suffering in what you know, at least you're in your power to do something about it.
Yeah.
Even if that doing is simply just seeing yourself, feeling yourself in that. If you're suffering in the not know, in the silence, in the sleepiness, you are standing in the power of someone else to make the decision for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because although the work is painful, going through all of this, I now feel, and I know it's only going to get better, more peaceful, more at ease, more free, more joyful than I ever have before. And I'm just so excited for where it's going to bring me next.
And you also are way more discerning in what comes into your life and not. And when we don't know, we don't have that ability to be discerning. And that's when we go through our life looking around, feeling like, is this really as good as it gets?
Yeah.
Right? Or why am I dating these guys? Or why is there patterns in the guys that I date? Or why did it no, there's no good men out there, or business has to be hard, or money doesn't grow on trees. Those are all unconscious things that people say. So there's proof that there's still suffering in the unconscious. So it's whether you choose to suffer and take care of yourself in your own power, or suffer at the whim of someone else's control.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
I choose.
That's all for today. Until next time, trust yourself, shine your light, and stay true to your heart and mind. Love you.